Welcome to Dirty Data here on the fourth period. That's Aaron Ward and Shane Kelly. I'm David Pagnotta. And gentlemen, let's discuss the Toronto Maple Leafs. Just what everybody wants to hear. But there are some areas on this team that are troubling and concerning, boys. And let's start off with the obvious. It's goaltending. What's going on between the pipes in Toronto?
Yeah, I think Toronto's showing some deficiencies in nets. I mean, not only is it that they've basically banked on one guy on his performance from last year, he started out the Montreal series uh, with excitement. He gave a lot of people some reason to believe in the goaltending position, and towards the end, Montreal found a way not only to beat the team, but specifically beat Campbell. Coming into the season, I think they put too much pressure on him, or too much in the way of expectations. They didn't really get him much in terms of a backup. Mrazek, is pegged in Carolina for the longest time as being a 1A, but essentially they had two Bs in Carolina, Reimer and Mrazek. So I don't know if the expectation was there that Mrazek was supposed to save him, but it wasn't addressed. The other comparison, maybe fair or not, is looking at a guy like Freddie Anderson, having been in that position formerly. I mean, he struggled in front of this group of players, and now he's in Carolina in front of a system, a group of guys that allows him to really be a stabilizing force. So I look at Jack Campbell and I say to myself, is this the goaltender or is this a situation? But I mean, to have all this excitement about Toronto going forward, saying this is the year they finally take that step, I feel like the Achilles heel right now is they never really actually, whether it's for cap reasons or whatever reason, haven't really addressed having one or a solid tandem back there to go forward in the playoffs with confidence.
Well, first 2 months of the season, you thought that they'd found maybe a Vezina Trophy candidate. Really, I mean, he was arguably the best
Yeah.
goalie in the league from save percentage on down to goals saved above average and expected save percentage. I just don't understand what happened about 2.5 months in to turn him from one of the best goalies in the league to probably, and it hurts to say this, the worst starter in hockey. I mean, in his last 18 games, he's given up 16 more goals than the average NHL goalie would be expected to. That's really hard to come back from if you're the Leafs playing in front of him. The other thing, Wardo, you highlighted, I think coming into the season, both Mrazek and Campbell are pretty high variance goalies. There's really, really high highs and really, really low lows. And having two guys like that, if they get cold at the same time, you're sunk. And right now, that's what's happening.
Is it exclusively, though, the goaltending? Because obviously there are other elements that kind of play a factor. But what about the team's defense and their structure? How is that affecting the overall team and the goalies as well?
Okay, I'm going to completely blame Shane for this because he's basically he's influenced how I watch the Toronto Maple Leafs currently. When he started telling me, look at the way they enter the zone, look at how dead set they are in their approach of carrying the puck across, and the fact that this is a high risk situation, right? And as I watch Toronto come across with all their skilled forwards, there are a ton of turnovers. So when you're asking your D core to get up in the play and support the play, is this the D is the problem, or the forwards are creating a problem for the D? Listen, there are some deficiencies back there. I mean, Hall and mustn't take a fair amount of abuse, but I would tell you, I mean, if we look at numbers, these guys, and I'm stealing this from Shane from years past or the season past, these guys end up taking a ton of their face-offs starting off in their defensive zone. So already put it at a deficit. These guys have to deal with a ton of pressure because when the turnover happens, let's be honest. I mean, the forwards aren't always keen at getting back to help out, so there's a ton of outnumbered rushes. So is it the D that are creating their own problems with not getting the puck out or turnovers or lack of coverage? Or is it getting in the neutral zone in the offense and there's constant pressure coming back and these guys are having to deal with it? As I watch these games, I would say that it's both and that there's a lot to deal with for Toronto in the way in which they approach the game and how they play the game.
Yeah, I mean, if you went out and you added like a Victor Hedman or Kale McCarr to this group, sure, it's really going to improve it, but that's not realistic. And to me, I think Aaron nailed it more so when he said it's the system. This is a group, especially up front, where they carry the puck in more than almost anybody in the league. They're top 5 or 6 in terms of attempts to carry the puck in. The problem is they're in the bottom 5 or 6 in terms of success. So that tends to create a lot of transition the other way. And that's why you're seeing these crazy high scoring games that Toronto's involved in because both teams are just being fed constant transition opportunities. So sure, could you go out and get certain defensemen out of help? Yes. But to me, it's more of a system issue, and especially in the playoffs where it becomes harder to transition the puck into the offensive zone with control. You're playing better players, you're playing better systems all the time. I think that could really pose a problem for the Leafs.
Here's one thing also we have to add. When you start thinking about this team from a forwards perspective, what we know about forwards is that when things aren't going well, they err on the side of offense, right? So they have a tendency to step away from the D. The fact that this is more or less a one-line driven team currently, and that we came to expect over the course of the season, it was almost death taxes and Nylander doing something spectacular. He has not shown up in that capacity. Tavares has not shown up in that capacity. Puts a lot more pressure on the top line, but these guys not performing offensively leads them to take chances that are unnecessary. Puts more pressure on who? The D. So overall, like I said, the struggles of some of the forwards have a tendency to create more problems for the D having to cover up. And you can't just put things on Riley to have to play 30, 35 minutes a game and try to manage this. Like you said, he's not a Kel McCarr, and he's not a guy that's apt to manage it like this.
Yeah.
One of the things you kind of touched on there, sorry, Shane, and we can get to that. I'm assuming from an offensive perspective, like one of the issues that they had in the playoffs against Montreal as the series progressed in that first round was their offense dried up. And other than Nylander at the time, nobody else was stepping up. So right now, if you're not getting those secondary scorers in place, Shane, I've got to imagine that's a big problem.
Yeah, I actually think losing Zach Hyman has been exposed more and more as the season's gone along, because when Tavares and Nylander aren't firing, and they're not firing now, like they're getting outscored at 5-on-5, they're getting outchanced at 5-on-5. There's nobody else really up and down this lineup that outside of the first line that I think they can look to and plug in reliably on that second line and say, okay, you got to drive it for a bit while these two figure it out. They're two of the highest paid players on the team. They have to be better because the depth in this lineup, they've got a lot of really good depth pieces, but they're not depth pieces that you can plug into a second line and say, okay, you're going to solve the problem for us. So to me, you're talking about where to acquire a player. If that type of player is available, somebody to ride shotgun with these two and help them a little bit, I think they probably didn't expect to have to do it at the start of the year. They might have to go that route now.
Hey, if you're a Leafs fan and you're skittish, we can understand, because last year Marner not showing up at the playoffs was a quick exit. Now you have almost an entire line not there. I'm worried, and I will allow these guys to have a little bit. I'll allow this fan base to have a little bit of panic in their game.
Okay, quickly, one answer each. Is it an extra score for the second line, or is it a top four defenseman ahead of the trade deadline? What is the one area you hit? Shane, start with you.
Extra forward.
Wardo?
Well, of course, as a D union, I'm going with D. The defensemen have full influence over the direction of a team. I just feel like you've got to spread out some of the responsibility back there. But here's the problem: cap situation, Toronto's situation. Where are you going to find a top four D? Because you've got 20 plus odd teams who think they still might have a chance in the playoffs come trade deadline, trying to acquire the same guy. That or a goalie is where we're at.
You said real quick. That's not fair.
Well, that's he gets the buy.
I'm never real quick.
Yeah, he's got 3 rings. He's got some time. Listen, Jake Muzzin, if we're getting good news, Jake Muzzin hit the ice earlier today as he's getting back from his concussion. So hopefully that's a quick return for them. But we'll keep tabs on the Leafs and the deadline here on the fourth period as the weeks progress. That's Aaron Ward and Shane Kelly. I'm Dave Pagnotta. Until next time.